Good afternoon, I'm Jack Hybor. Today's service is going to be a little bit different. Our summer missions trip team that went out to Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho is going to be reporting. In just a moment, each teen and sponsor that went on the trip will come and tell about a day on the trip and something that impacted them on the trip. The summer's trip was July 11th through 25th, and we were able to minister in 3 churches, and we also helped for a week at Red Cliff Bible Camp, and each one of them is going to get an opportunity to tell a little bit about what happened on one of the days. I want to take a moment and thank the Lord for allowing us to go on this trip. Really, when you look back at it, it's probably the only type of trip that really could have occurred in a summer like this with COVID and all the other things that have come along with that. The planning for this trip started last fall, so really only the Lord could have known what was going to happen with all those things. But the fact that we were going to the western states into much more sparsely populated areas is what allowed us to still take this trip, and we're so thankful for how the Lord orchestrated that. We had the opportunity to read a book in preparation for the trip. That book is called The Big Gospel in Small Places, and it helped emphasize ministry in smaller churches and towns. It was a big help in preparing our minds to be able to minister in these different locations and these different smaller churches. I also want to thank you all for your prayers and financial support that helped us be able to go on this trip. Now, at this point, let's hear from our teens.
Hi, I'm Claire Young. I'm a 10th grader, and this is the first missions trip that I've ever gone on. And I'm going to be talking about the first day, the day we left on the airport. So we met up at the airport at ODARC 30, and there was so much luggage. I've never seen so much in my life. After getting all our luggage checked, we headed through security. While we were waiting for the flight, Evan distributed a game for us to play on the trip. It's technically called Word Assassin, and like you say, I killed you or something like that when you get someone out. But since we were in an airport and later going to be on a plane, it was renamed Word Gotcha. Basically, you need to get someone to say a specific word to get them out. Lucas got Caleb out before we were even on the plane, and Evan got Pastor Evan out because the word he needed Pastor Evan to say was church. Alex and I sat together in the middle window seats, and a stranger sat in the aisle seat. He was asleep for most of the time, so we had to climb over him whenever we needed to get out. Alex has long legs and could just climb over, but I had to brace my arms against the seat and vault over him. On the way back, I cracked my head on the overhead compartment, but I didn't wake him up, so that's a victory. Pastor Evan and Mr. Hybor got the rented van and minivan, and the Hybors and the guys loaded into the van, while the Charleses and girls went into the minivan. I wasn't in the guys' van, so I can't speak 100% for what happened. During most of the trips, they were extremely weird, but apparently the plane ride drained them, though supposedly they had enough energy to dump water on Lucas while he was sleeping. The trip in the girls' van was more quiet every other day, but not this one. We listened to the audiobook of The Green Ember, which Landon calls the bunny story. I was determined that Kelsey would like it, which is probably why she didn't. We had a little bit of a hard time adjusting to the different scenery. Pastor Evan turned the corner on the way to Walmart, realized that there were visible mountains in front of him, and declared that he was moving out west. Everyone in my van spent the first half an hour taking pictures and just being in awe of the scenery, and apparently I'm not much of a scenery person. Before the trip, I was under the mistaken impression that my youth pastor was sane, but he had disillusioned me pretty quickly. I think by the end, the Charleses had temporarily adopted 2 teenage girls. After about 4-ish hours of traveling, we arrived at Kemmer. Chain businesses there include Taco Time, and we got to Grace Baptist Church there, where Pastor Hartman was waiting. He let us in, and we waited for Grace Baptist teens to come. One teen named Brace came. At first, it was a little awkward since there was only one person there, but Evan discovered that Brace liked card tricks, and they bonded over that. We ate pizza and drank various types of Coke. And yes, it's called Coke, not soda or pop. Kelsey tried Mountain Dew for the first time, which was a mistake. Her laugh sounds like a hyena at the best of times, but when she drinks Mountain Dew, she sounds like a demented hyena. On drugs. After we ate, Ethan preached a really good message about the creativity that God has given us and when we're not supposed to use it in the planning of our future. Once we finished at Grace Baptist for the night, we loaded into the vans and drove down to the motel we were staying at. Pastor Evan gave us the debriefing and told us that we weren't allowed to open the door to anyone who didn't know the password, which was cross before the crown. My room settled down quickly, but I can't promise that the others did. On the trip, we spent a lot of time working. For the people we met, all this work seemed to be fairly normal. It revealed to me how little practical Christianity I do. We have a tendency to see Christianity as doctrines and obeying rules, but it's so much more than that. We should be involved in active service. While we were at Rexburg, Pastor Lacey mentioned that Mormons try to use James to prove that we should work for our salvation. He said that they ignore how James clearly says that we are saved by faith and that we show our faith by our good works. That really struck me. How can I say I have faith if I'm not showing it?
Well, there are many things that I could say about day 2, but one of the things that really struck me as I got up in the morning was the fact that it was 40 degrees outside. And that was a wonderful brisk morning welcome to our new location. We loved our time there in Kemmerer, and that morning for the service, we were able to minister in the church. Actually, Jack Hybor preached a message on contentment that was a very helpful beginning to our trip, reminding us of the joy and confidence that we could have in any situation. And then our teens were able to do, actually we had a couple of the guys were able to do a brass number for the church. And even though there was social distancing, we were still able to get to know some of the folks there at Kemmerer, and we were very thankful for that. But after the morning service, we took a quick 1.5 to 2 hour drive to a nearby place in northern Utah called Manila. And I think for any of the teens that you speak to, this was a very memorable church. Though it was small, it had a real family feel. There were about 10 people there, and I was able to preach. We also were able to do some testimonies, sharing about our service, and it really was a special time. But I think it introduced us all to the need for ministry in small places, just like Jack mentioned a little while ago. I want to finish mine just talking quickly about Pastor Hartman. He's the pastor of the church there in Kemmerer, and one of the things that really made an impact on our group was the fact of his faithfulness. I was able to speak with him for a while on Saturday night, hear his testimony, and they've been at various churches out west throughout their ministry. But one of the things that struck all of us was the fact that each and every week they finished their church service in the morning, drive 1.5 to 2 hours to a small town of 500 people to faithfully minister. And they've done this for over 3 years, as that church has not had a pastor. And it has gone along with exactly what Jack mentioned at the beginning, that no matter where you are, a big place like Charlotte or a small place like Manila, God needs faithful ministry and faithful ministers. And so we're thankful for what we learned there. The next group will come up and tell us about our transition to camp. And so at this time, we'll have them come up.
Hello, I am Jacob Hybor, not Evan, and I am in 9th grade. This is my first time on a mission trip. On our first full day at Red Cliff, we began working soon after breakfast. The boys drove in the van for an hour or so to unload a trailer of firewood for the Holtz, who just moved to the area to serve at the camp. The winters are very long and cold. In fact, it's going to be 27 degrees in Wyoming tonight. Winters are already starting. They need to heat their homes for a long time, and typically houses are heated by wood, a lot of it. After some discussion, we decided to form a bucket brigade to get the job done most efficiently. It cut down on the walking, but it worked our arms quite a bit. Once we finished stacking, we took a picture in front of our masterpiece. Each load has about 2,000 pieces of wood. Yes, we counted. Meanwhile, all of the girls and lady sponsors helped clean things up back at the camp. Side note, when I say girls, I mean both of them. There are only 2. After lunch, we were assigned our next task, cleaning debris. The director at the camp likes to keep things neat, so any form of wood lying around, sticks, logs, stumps, tree trunks, fallen trees, were loaded into the truck and unloaded into the gigantic burn pile. The organizer of this operation was Captain D, a member of the staff, and of course his truck, known as Lucy. Captain D influenced all of us. He was a godly and very inspirational man. We all enjoyed his motivational sayings like, "There is no light at the end of the tunnel, just more tunnels that lead to more tunnels." By the time we were done with our jobs, we were hungry and ready for supper. At supper, we celebrated Landon's birthday. The staff had birthday decorations, balloons, and dessert on hand. I don't remember what the meal was, but I remember it was very good. After supper, we ended the day with free time. Some of us played basketball out in the court and played games in the lodge. We were already beginning to become tired and sunburnt, but I think I can safely say we were all having a great time. Over the course of the trip, God has been speaking to me about my priorities. It's very easy to get caught up in the things of this world, like work or school, video games, popularity, books, etc. It may be our goals, like becoming a good athlete, attending college, or just living a good life that get in the way of spending time with God. But when it comes down to it, what really matters? It's easy to say, oops, I didn't read my Bible today. Maybe I'll have more time tomorrow. But God should be our first priority, not just a second thought. All our other aspirations and desires should come after that. I need to ask myself constantly, am I serving God to the best of my ability?
My name is Kelsey Halstead, and this was my first missions trip. The cabins we stayed in at the camp were called Battleship. All the girls, or both of us, and lady sponsors stayed in this cabin. Then all the guys stayed in the cabin next to us. The place where we ate our meals was at the pavilion. So this building is used as the kitchen, the dining room, and place for services. For those of you who aren't aware, their lodge burned down in 2017. They're in the process of building a new lodge, and right now they have pretty much the framing on it. And while we were there, they were working on the electrical and plumbing. So far, it looks amazing, and I cannot wait to see it when it's all done. This day, after breakfast, the guys went to town to unload wood, while me, Claire, Miss Jamie, and Landon helped stack wood. And yes, Landon actually did help for the first few minutes. After that, we went to lunch, and by that time, the guys were back from town. After lunch, we went with Captain D, one of the workers, into the woods to help clean up the brush. It was hard work, but Captain D made the work enjoyable, and I barely thought about how hard the work was. We did that until dinner time. After dinner, we got cleaned up and headed to the pavilion to eat s'mores and play games. The game that I joined in was called Avalon, which is now my favorite game.
Hello, I'm Lucas Taylor. I am currently in 9th grade. This is actually one of my first missions trip. I'm just going to get a quick overview of the first week of camp, going to Red Cliff. We did some hard work stacking logs and going to families' houses and dropping them off. But one thing that I'm here to talk about is Captain D, the one man that kept us going. He's the kind of guy that would say something just random to get you confused. He'll say it and you'll just sit there for like 5 seconds wondering, did that actually mean something? But then he always gets you to keep working, and he's fun. But he also kind of messed with us. His truck, Lucy, we would have to load and unload every single day. Finally, last day when we were done, last load of the day, he takes the truck over, and we figured out Lucy has a way to bring the truck bed and dump and all. So he was able to mess with us, and we were kind of devastated because all that hard work, and we realized it could have been easier. But one way that he was able to help us as well was perseverance. Even though he was funny, he would keep us going, and he would make sure we had everything done. We also had some fun with games and playing, meeting new people. We made some new friends, and one of my friends that I met in Rexburg was Alex. That my takeaway from him is also perseverance, because even though his dad was in the military and gone almost all the time, he still got his stuff done. He wasn't worried about it, and he had to do training, but he still got it done. So even though it was hard and he wasn't expecting it, he was able to finish it.
My name is Brandon Halstead. I am in 9th grade, and this was my first missions trip. So the second half of the first week, we started cutting wood from the forest in the camp, and there were 5 main things that we remember from the time. There was wood, the wood splitters, wood, horseflies, and wood. After work one day, we went on a hike up the side of a mountain, and then at the end was this beautiful view of the Red Cliff and beautiful Wi-Fi reception. After that day, Keith had an encouraging message about not saying that the firewood is going to go and be forgotten, but he reminded us that the firewood could help someone be warm, and it could help them be brought to the Lord.
Hi, my name is Ethan Lott. I got the last full day at Red Cliff, and this day began like any other day at Red Cliff. I mean, wood, like how else could it start there? But that was our morning and early afternoon. But then we had an early end to our work for that day. We got cleaned up and we headed out. Where were we going? The McGills, he was the man who would drive the truckloads of wood to town for us to unload. His son's family, they'd hold like a get-together for the camp staff. And we were just really honored. Felt like really honored because they invited us to their little get-together. And there was like yard games and food, and it was just really nice. They were so grateful for our help and so gracious for inviting us. We headed back to camp with joyful hearts and full stomachs. That one was our last night for looking at the stars. We'd heard so much about those stars, and we just really wanted to see them. But at curfew, it was getting dark, and we couldn't see them, though, because even though it was getting dark, there was just that little bit of sun that poked up over the mountains, just enough so we couldn't see. And so we walked into the cabins in the pits of despair when a saving light shone forth, namely, Godsend the bat. Godsend sat there on the wall in all his batty glory. People freaked out, and I got to try and catch him. I really did try, but as I closed my hands around him, he slipped between my thumbs and was free. The next 15 minutes were spent frantically trying to herd Godsend with pool noodles and trash bags. Eventually, a tuckered out Godsend hid in the ceiling. It was enough. Hunter told us to look at the stars, and the curfew went out the window. It was awesome in the truest sense of the word. There was an incredible amount of the stars. There were no clouds in sight. It was so clear. You could see so many, even like the arm of the Milky Way across is what they said. And both girls and lady sponsors started screaming when we saw shooting stars. Actually, it might have just been Kelsey. It's hard to tell the difference between the screaming. But we went to bed that night knowing we'd never forget that incredible display of our Creator's creative power. One thing that I really learned that trip and was enjoyable was that God gave me the opportunity to interact with a lot of neat people. But it wasn't so much a single person as the whole mentality that really impacted me. I mean, I remember at the church in Manila, we ran up to do our brass part. We were late, and we had to run in there and just play it on the fly. And it was quite possibly the worst time we'd ever played it. But then heading down and after the service, people were just so grateful. And it wasn't just there. everywhere we went, there was an infectious attitude of gratitude, and that was something that really stood out and impacted me.
Hello, my name is Caleb Lott, and for those of you that don't know, that was just my older brother Ethan, and I am part of the missions team this year and also part of the 9th grade class at MCA. And I will be sharing about the last day that we were at the camp and while we were traveling to Idaho. We headed out after breakfast, so then we loaded all that luggage up and just headed out. The bus rides were amazing. Well, I mean, for most of us. We were in the bus rides for at least 30 hours, throughout the trip. We had many great memories. For instance, having arguments in British accents, Evan and Ethan, or even just Evan talking in a Kermit accent, or even just saying or making jokes about the terrain because we were lucky if we saw a tree anywhere. And oh, don't let me forget to mention, there were no such thing as cows. Everyone called them wild hamburgers in their natural habitat. And overall, I'm very thankful we could go on this trip. As Mr. Highboy said, if it was any other trip, it would have been canceled. God knew exactly what we were doing, and it was amazing to experience the West, grow spiritually, and just have a great time learning about others and meeting new people. One thing I learned throughout the trip is constantly trying to have a servant's mindset, because you never know what a small act of kindness or what it will do for that person or what it will mean. For example, the entire week we were doing the wood, and we were just cutting it up and getting it ready so that they could have camp during the winters. If we didn't do that, they wouldn't be able to have those camps, and there wouldn't be the opportunity for campers to come grow spiritually or even know the Lord. And it's just really encouraging to see that even though we don't think that it's a big thing for us to do, it could really mean a lot for anyone else. And now we're going to have the girls play a song that they did on the trip.
I get to tell you about our second Sunday out west when we were in Idaho and at Grace Baptist there in Rexburg, Idaho. But it'd be hard to tell you about that if I didn't step back to Saturday night just a little bit to set the stage for you and set the scene up just a little bit. If you can picture it, and you can see from the picture there that you're looking at, the picture of the church, and there's the auditorium, and you can see exactly what I'm about to describe. You take 3 chairs on each side, and we would put them together, and then maybe one more for your head, or sometimes some guys used 8 chairs. That was their bed. So all the guys, and my wife and I, we slept at the church there the whole week in Rexburg, starting with Saturday night. And so we got there about 9 or 9:30. We practiced the music. We got everything ready for the next morning. But then we had to set up the entire auditorium as a bedroom. So we had torn all the chairs apart, and it's a room, as you can see, they're about the size of our fellowship hall, and had it all set up for sleeping. The guys slept, and then the next morning, so Sunday morning, started with us having to completely reset the church, not just the auditorium, but the fellowship hall area, everything. We had our breakfast and then had to completely clean the church and sanitize everything and set up the chairs for the morning service. So that took quite a bit of work just to get it ready for the morning service. Then the Sunday school hour started, and very similar to the church in Kemmer, it was a very small crowd for Sunday school. Very few people showed up for Sunday school. But then when the morning service started, more and more people came and had a very warm, I would call it a warm environment for the service, very friendly people, and definitely grateful for us being there. Pastor Evan was able to preach out of Philippians. And then following the morning service, we had a church fellowship outside. We were able to eat outside with the people and get to know them just a little bit. And that was a great experience as well. And then an evening service as well at the church there. One of the things that I really enjoyed was getting to see Pastor Lacey again. He and I had known each other in college, and we actually knew each other there from working together in nursing home ministry. It's great to see him this many years later serving faithfully in the ministry there in Rexburg, and that's the ministry he's been in pretty much since college. He did a couple other things at the beginning and then was out there and has been out there, I believe, for 18 years now at the church in Rexburg. And just so great to see his faithfulness. And then in the last 2 or 3 years, he's had some difficult physical circumstances to go through and often has to preach from sitting on a stool, but still, just the faithfulness that he has had to God and the positive attitude to hear. You won't hear him complain about the circumstances he's gone through, and it was great to get back in touch with and see how he is faithfully serving the Lord there in Rexburg.
Hello, my name is Evan Taylor, and I am 17 years old, making me the oldest in this group. This was my first mission trip here, and I had a lot of fun. During my day, we did outreach for both the younger kids and the teens at the church. We did the younger kids just in the beginning, and there were only 3 that showed up. We were told there could have been just about that many, or there could have been more. Well, we had 3, and it was good. I personally made a good connection with one of them named Johnny. Really nice guy, lots of fun, and I've been able to continue to have contacts with him today. When they first showed up, we played some games, played Sharks and Minnows and Duck, Duck, Goose, which was lots of fun having 3 younger kids and a ton of teens. Very interesting, lots of shenanigans. After that, we went inside and we had a sermon where Pastor Evan got to talk to them and tell them about the gospel. I was actually really encouraged with that. They interacted a lot more than I was expecting from them. They were asking questions, making comments, answering questions. It was really good, really encouraging. After that, we went into the other room and we did some crafts. Kelsey and Claire organized these, where they made bracelets, gospel bracelets, which went through story of the gospel. So it had, when the fall of man, when Christ came, died for our sins, and then afterwards up in heaven, the reward. It was lots of fun being able to talk with them, make a relationship, and just be able to help them with that. All that I was able to do with Johnny as well. Lots of fun. After that, they went home, and we had about 2 or so hours to get ready for the teens. So we ate lunch, got cleaned up, and got everything set up. Right off the bat, we did an icebreaker. There was actually a lot of teens that showed up. I think we about doubled our size in total. We played the name game. Basically, everyone stood in a circle. Someone was in the middle, and you're trying to get the person before they say someone else's name. Lots of fun, got you active, got you being able to know everyone's name. After that, we did skits. I was part of the team that actually made one of the skits called The History of the Joke. There was a lot of tripping, hitting people with boards, and throwing pies at each other's faces. After that, the Highbors did their skit that they got together called the DMV. It's supposed to be a dramatization of it. I don't think it was that, dramatic. It seemed pretty accurate in my opinion. But that was lots of fun. The teens there enjoyed that. After that, we did games called Nukem and Capture the Flag. Nukem was lots of fun. We didn't know it beforehand. The teens there taught it to us. You throw a volleyball over the net, back and forth, trying to get the other team to miss it. If they miss it, someone gets out, and you keep going, process of elimination there. After that, Ethan got to do his message for them again. This is his first time doing it here, but he did it earlier in the week in Utah. It was lots of fun being able to see the teens' reactions and being able to talk with them afterwards. I was personally able to connect with Bo, which is actually Johnny's older brother. We've been talking, and it's just been nice being able to get to know him better, to be able to interact with him, and just build a lasting relationship that's made it past the mission trip. And it's been a great encouragement just getting to know him and more about his family.
Hi, I'm April Highbor. I got to cook for the 17 people on our missions trip, but we couldn't go to Wyoming without stopping at the oldest, most popular national park in the United States, one of the most geologically diverse places on the planet, and the world's largest active volcano, Yellowstone National Park. The long lines that you wait in there kind of remind you of going into a Disney World or something. We downloaded an app, and you don't have cell phone reception in most of the park, so the app was able to kind of give us a map and tell us where we were using GPS and give us information about the park. I think this day was probably the most photographed day of the whole thing. We did educate the teens about the dangers of the geothermal areas and the wildlife in the park before we went on the trip, and then again on the day of our visit to the park. And we had a great time enjoying the scenery from the boardwalks and watching the wildlife safely from our vehicles. Yellowstone National Park covers 3,500 square miles, mostly in Wyoming, but partly in Montana and Idaho. So obviously we only saw a small portion of the park. At the park we saw bison, elk, bald eagles, one with fish in its talons, and mule deer. We got to see places like Firehole Canyon, Artist's Paint Pots. Artist's Paint Pots have bubbling mud that is the consistency of drywall mud this time of year, and with the smell of sulfur in the air. We took a little short hike around that. And Biscuit Basin is beautiful, bright blue waters. It's called Sapphire Pool. It was named for the biscuit-like deposits that used to exist, were destroyed after an earthquake in 1959. We went to Grand Prismatic Spring, which has brightly colored microbes. There's a picture of it there. That can live in extreme environments that God created. We went to the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, and then we picnicked at Old Faithful. It's not the biggest, but it's the most faithful, erupting more than 20 times a day. It's a chamber of hot magma that lies underneath Yellowstone that heats the water, and then when the pressure is high enough, it blasts through the porous rock. And a creation fact, because it's that hot, it's still that hot to be able to do that, it's proof that this happened thousands of years ago, not millions of years ago. And then our last stop at Yellowstone was Hayden Valley, where we saw the most bison we've ever seen in our lifetime. The beauty of God's creation was all around us, leaving us amazed and giving us all memories that we'll have forever to be reminded about the God we worship. A couple things about the teens representing Bible Baptists on this trip that struck me on this trip. They were all hardworking. They were all friendly with each of the people that we met in the churches from every youth there. They were inclusive, and they were just a fun group to be with.
Hi, we already went. We don't need to introduce ourselves. So, Wednesday morning, after getting prepared for the day, which involved cleaning up the guys' mess, we met with Pastor Lacey and a former Mormon named Steve there to learn about Mormonism. They went over the history of Mormonism and their practices and beliefs, and even gave us verses that challenge those beliefs and show us why Mormonism is wrong, why it is against what God has clearly said. He left some Mormon literature for us to read, and we kind of just glanced at the Book of Mormon, but I think most of us read the Children's Encyclopedia of Mormon Beliefs that he read, which is their book of indoctrination. It was fascinating. One thing that I thought was very interesting was the fact that they believe after you die and before you were born, you are a spirit being, and they think that Noah became Gabriel after he died, and before he was born and after he died, Adam was supposedly Michael.
That afternoon, a group from the Lacey's church, including our group, went on a prayer walk. We started at the Mormon temple and split into smaller groups and went all around these areas, praying for the city of Rexburg that one day they would come to know Christ. The next stop was at the BYU campus, and we split into groups again and walked to a park. While we were waiting to meet up with the rest of their groups, me, Mrs. Highbore, and Claire were able to meet a girl and get to know her just a little bit, and also invite her to the church later that night. She didn't end up coming, but now she is aware of the church, and hopefully she will one day go to a service or an activity. Something that I really, really admired about Pastor Lacey was just his compassion for his church in the city of Rexburg. Funny story, when we were at camp, there were several beautiful pictures of scenery that were clearly someone had drawn or painted. I had thought, I wonder who drew these. I also collect postcards wherever I go, and the one that I got from Red Cliff was a pencil sketch of the Red Cliffs. So after admiring all those paintings and sketches, we get to Rexburg, and little did I know, I would be staying with the artist himself. Me, Claire, and the Charles stayed with Pastor Lacey and his family. After getting to talk to Pastor Lacey, we found out he was an artist, and he was showing us some of his work, and the postcard that I bought was in there. It was really cool to be able to talk with him about art and techniques that he uses. He actually gave me a postcard that he had done. On Wednesday night, Pastor Lacey actually did a chalk talk for the service. He drew a picture with chalks while he told the Bible story about Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. This was amazing to see his picture change from one scene to another and end up challenging us to preach and teach throughout the world.
Okay, my name is Alex Young. I'm in 9th grade, so yeah, I go Matthews Christian Academy. And okay, I was given the last day that we spent at Grace Baptist Church. The morning of that day was a very busy morning, doing a bunch of work, including finishing the flower beds that we started the day before, and doing some touch-up to the outside of the church. We also put all the luggage that we had piled up the day before into the trailer, and then we disinfected all the surfaces and doing other stuff to make it seem as 9 boys hadn't slept and ate in it. Probably one of the lessons I learned was coming from Red Cliff. It was like hard not to want to just relax coming from like a ton of work. But the day after, we had to do a service and having a potluck after that. And then the day after that, we had a bunch of ministries, and at the end of the day, we had work and more work, and it was just hard not to want to complain. So, yeah.
So I'm Jeremiah Hybor, and I'm in 9th grade. So after all the 2 weeks of this work and the fun, we were finally going to be going home on July 24th. We woke up at the hotel, had breakfast, and breakfast at the hotel during COVID meant only a few things were available, and we had to ask the lady behind the table for what we wanted. No waffles. After breakfast, we packed the vans and trailer and drove to the airport. We got lunch there and boarded the plane for the long flight back. We arrived in Charlotte around 7 and collected our luggage, then found our family or friends in some cases and drove home. So one great thing for my whole family on the trip was that my uncle has been working on and off at Red Cliff Bible Camp for 25 years. Uncle Dave, as everyone now knows him as, and Aunt Wixie have been full-time at the camp for 5 years. Uncle Dave is in charge of the facilities, and Aunt Wixie is in charge of housekeeping, which sometimes means trapping squirrels and keeping the critters outside where they belong. It was a highlight of the trip to be able to see them and see my cousins, because we don't get to see them much other than at Christmas. Because my cousin Anna has been on our family prayer list for most of my lifetime, and she's had multiple surgeries since birth. Her most recent surgery was just a few weeks ago in Salt Lake City, where she got some hardware removed from one of her legs that was helping her legs grow to be the same length. Her life is a testimony of God's loving answers to many prayers. My cousins Leonard and Joseph were also there, but we were very busy and didn't get to spend much time with them due to social distancing at mealtimes, and they were in childcare at the camp while we worked. I'm very glad I was able to see my family this summer.
Well, as we wrap things up here, I just wanted to come back and say a few words in closing. One of the things that we wanted to be sure to communicate to you, our church family, is our great thanks for your support. We know that you were praying for us. We know that many gave to help make this mission trip possible. And we want to say thank you. And there are many things that I think this group, that each individual is going to take away from this trip that God has used to change our lives. And I'm going to come back to one of the big ones, hopefully, here in just a second. But we do want to say thank you. We also want to thank those parents who trusted us at this time to take this trip. We are so thankful for what the Lord allowed us to do with this time, and thankful for those that trusted us on this trip. And then finally, just want to say thank you to these teenagers. One of the things that I hear a good amount from some of the teens is that we get put in uncomfortable circumstances. One of those they have just passed through. And although the mission trips are often for uncomfortable things, getting out of our comfort zone, meeting new people, being in new places, we all know that those are things that the Lord very often uses to grow us in our lives. And so I'm so thankful that this group of teenagers was willing to take that step. I'm so thankful that our parents were willing to let them. I'm so thankful for you, our church family, who participated with us through prayer and through giving to make this happen for them to learn. Well, you were able to hear about many people that touched our lives on this trip. You were able to hear about many circumstances that touched our lives. I wanted to finish by just reminding us about what our theme was. You've all seen us in these red shirts with the crown on the front. You haven't been able to see the back, but the back says that it's not about me. And then right at the bottom, it has 4 words: unity, humility, service, and worship. And these are all from Philippians 2, and a few months ago I was able to share before we left on the trip. I was able to do a Sunday night about that, so I'm not going to go through that here. But I will say that one of the desires that I know I have had and that our group has had is that one of the things that will be unforgettable about this trip is that life is not about me. It's not about us. It is about what Jesus has done. And so that is what not only brings us together with other people in unity, it's what reminds us to humble ourselves before our God. It is what teaches us that we serve other people, and ultimately it's what points us to worshiping our Savior. And so I hope that even as you hear this today, that this would be an encouragement to you for what our church has been able to do, the impact that we've been able to make, but also the impact that God has made on us through what He's taught us and what we've experienced. And so at this point, I will close our service in prayer. Our Father, we do rejoice in all that you've done. We thank you for each one of these teenagers. We thank you for what they've been able to experience. We thank you for what they've been able to learn. And we also pray now as we finish that even just something like this, a service reminding ourselves and sharing with our church what you've done, we pray that you might use this as an encouragement. Lord, we know that you've done a lot, and we also admit that we don't know everything that you've done. And yet we pray that this trip would have a continuing impact on us and also those who we have had the opportunity to minister to. And so we thank you for what you've done, and we praise you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen.